What punishment was so terrifying? It turned rulers into legends, and enemies into eternal warnings. Few punishments in history carry the horrifying weight of flaying, the deliberate and methodical removal of human skin. It was never merely a form of execution, but a symbolic act, a tool of fear and domination designed to linger long after the deed was done. More than physical pain, flaying was psychological warfare, turning human suffering into a public warning. Among these brutal practitioners, none were more infamous than the ancient Assyrians. A chilling display of power that spanned civilizations, from the ruthless Assyrians and calculating Persians to the unstoppable Mongols and medieval monarchs. In this video, we dive deep into history's darkest corners to uncover how skin, yes, skin, became a canvas for control, justice, and absolute terror. The Neo-Assyrian Empire was built on a foundation of calculated terror. These were not simply warriors conquering through might, but engineers of fear using cruelty as an extension of their statecraft. Their military campaigns were as much about psychological domination as they were about battlefield victories. Those who resisted Assyrian authority faced more than death. They faced annihilation of identity, body, and memory. The siege and conquest of Lachish in 701 BCE, led by King Sennacherib, stands as one of the most notorious examples. At his palace in Nineveh, intricate stone reliefs depict in chilling clarity the aftermath of the battle, Assyrian soldiers systematically flaying captives. These images weren't just historical records, they were propaganda tools etched into palace walls to remind both citizens and enemies of Assyrian power. But Sennacherib was only continuing a legacy established by his predecessors. In 647 BCE, King Ashurbanipal took Assyrian brutality to new extremes during his conquest of Elam. The capital, Susa, was left in smoldering ruins, and captured leaders were subjected to horrific torment. Inscriptions from the library of Ashurbanipal record the flaying of rebel leaders, their skins hung as grim trophies. Even earlier, under King Ashurnasirpal II, 883 to 859 BCE, such acts were already becoming standardized. Ashurnasirpal himself boasted of flaying nobles who had rebelled and draping their skins over city walls. His words, carved in cuneiform and preserved in the ruins of Kalhu, modern-day Nimrud, stand as some of the most disturbing testaments to ancient cruelty. The Assyrians understood that conquest was incomplete without psychological domination. Their empire thrived not just through military success, but through fear that transcended the battlefield. The terror they instilled ensured submission from afar and compliance from within. Their use of flaying was not an isolated practice, but a systemic method of control, echoing across time. While the Assyrians wielded flaying as an extension of war, the Achaemenid Persians adapted the method into a symbol of justice. Under Persian rule, it became a grim yet purposeful punishment meant to reinforce the unbending authority of the state. It was no longer just about fear, but about law and order taken to the extreme. One of the most infamous examples of Persian justice is the case of Sisamnes, a corrupt judge during the reign of King Cambyses II, son of Cyrus the Great. As recorded by Herodotus, Sisamnes was found guilty of accepting bribes, but Cambyses did more than sentence him to death. In an act designed to deliver an unforgettable message, Sisamnes was flayed and his skin was stretched and used to cover the judge's seat. The next man to assume the position, Sisamnes' own son, would pass judgment while seated on this grim reminder of what corruption would cost. Justice in the Persian view was not only about retribution, it was about creating symbols that endured. This philosophy extended beyond corruption to rebellion. When Darius the Fire ascended to the throne in 521 BCE, he faced a widespread rebellion in Babylon, led by Nebuchadnezzar III. In suppressing the revolt, Darius employed severe punishments, including execution, mutilation, and flaying. These acts were commemorated in the Behistun inscription, a massive rock relief carved into a cliff in modern-day Iran. Here, the Persians used flaying not to terrify indiscriminately as the Assyrians did, but to establish a clear and brutal moral code. Obedience and loyalty would be rewarded, defiance would be met with unforgettable consequences. In another part of the world, centuries later, the Mongols would rise to power with a similarly ruthless approach. Known for their swift conquests and strategic brilliance, the Mongols were also masters of psychological warfare. Their brutality was efficient, calculated to disarm resistance before it could gather force. They knew that the memory of past horrors could precede them, softening defenses and encouraging surrender. During the Mongol invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire between 1220 and 1221 CE, this philosophy was executed to terrifying effect. Cities such as Samarkand and Urgench fell not only to superior military tactics, but to a carefully orchestrated campaign of terror. While surrender was sometimes an option, those who resisted were subjected to horrors intended to be talked about far and wide. Persian sources suggest that Mongols flayed certain captured officials, especially those who had directly opposed Genghis Khan. These skins were reportedly sent to neighboring cities as a grotesque message. This is the price of defiance. In Mongol hands, flaying became a tool not of justice or punishment, but of overwhelming domination. It was meant to break the will of enemies before they ever set eyes on a Mongol soldier. Europe too has a history of flaying, though it was far less common than in the Near East or Asia. In medieval Europe, flaying was reserved for crimes considered particularly egregious, such as high treason or regicide. Unlike the battlefield executions or noble beheadings of the time, flaying was a public spectacle, used to reinforce the authority of the state and the sanctity of its laws. One of the most gruesome examples was the fate of Pierre Bazile, the crossbowman who fatally wounded King Richard I of England, also known as Richard the Lionheart, in 1199. Though the dying king had pardoned him, Richard's soldiers ignored his last wish. Bazile was reportedly flayed alive in an act of revenge, his death serving as a warning against ever raising a hand against royalty. Flaying was not limited to those who attacked kings. In medieval France and parts of the Holy Roman Empire, counterfeiters could also face this grisly fate. Seen as economic traitors who threatened the stability of the realm, they were sometimes flayed and their remains displayed in public marketplaces. These executions served not only to punish but to dissuade others through sheer horror. The act of flaying counterfeiters was often accompanied by public proclamations, parades, or sermons, reinforcing the idea that tampering with the economy was a crime on par with treason. Market vendors and townspeople were compelled to witness these punishments, embedding the consequences of deception deep into communal memory. In China, a comparable yet even more elaborate form of punishment existed: Lingchi, or death by 1,000 cuts. Practiced from the 10th century until its abolition in the early 20th century, Lingchi involved the methodical slicing of the body over an extended period. The goal was not only death, but humiliation, degradation, and the complete erasure of a person's dignity. Lingchi was reserved for crimes deemed unforgivable, usually treason or the murder of a parent or master. One of its most infamous victims was Yuan Chonghuan, a loyal general of the Ming dynasty who had successfully defended China against the Manchu. In 1630, he was falsely accused of treason and sentenced to Lingchi. The execution took place in public, drawing large crowds. Some accounts suggest that onlookers took pieces of his flesh, though such reports may be exaggerated. Still, the message was clear. The penalty for betraying the state would not end with death. The last known use of Lingchi was in 1905, when a man named Fu Chu Li was executed for murdering his master. The execution was photographed by Georges Dumas, a French doctor, and these images caused international outrage. The following year, as China moved toward modernization and under increasing Western pressure, the practice was officially abolished. Where the Mongols used flaying to terrify and the Europeans employed it for dramatic justice, China's Lingchi aimed at something deeper, a total destruction of the person. It was a punishment meant not only to kill the body, but to erase the very idea of the individual from public memory. Few punishments evoke such a visceral reaction as flaying. Its legacy spans empires and continents, from the Assyrian walls of Nineveh to the courtrooms of Persia, from Mongol war camps to medieval European marketplaces, and finally to the execution grounds of imperial China. In every case, flaying represented more than physical torment. It was a message etched not just into flesh, but into the collective consciousness of societies. Whether employed to assert dominance, enforce justice, or paralyze opposition, The act of flaying has left a permanent mark on human history. It serves as a dark reminder of the extremes to which rulers have gone to maintain order and control. These harrowing episodes reflect not just past cruelty, but the nature of power itself, and the terrifying lengths to which it can stretch. As we look back, we see not only the suffering of the condemned, but the priorities of the societies that imposed such suffering. History, after all, is not just a record of events. It is a mirror to human nature, reflecting our fears, ambitions, and the enduring struggle between authority and rebellion. The echoes of flaying may have faded, but the lessons it imparts remain chillingly relevant even today. And there you have it, the chilling legacy of flaying, one of history's most terrifying punishments. From ancient empires to medieval courts, this brutal act was never just about death. It was about control, fear, and the horrifying display of absolute power. If this glimpse into humanity's darker past made you shiver, reflect, or even just think a little deeper about the price of order and obedience, then mission accomplished. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this video compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the strangest and darkest corners of history. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.